You know that moment when you realize you've been living in a cage made of someone else's money? That was me 6 months ago, divorce papers hidden in my briefcase, hands shaking as I stood in a penthouse that never felt like home. Convinced my billionaire wife had married me to prove a point to her family, that I was her rebellion, her charity case, her social experiment wrapped in a wedding ring. But then I heard her voice through that boardroom door, and what she said about me shattered everything I thought I knew. If you've ever felt like someone's project, like you're drowning in a life that looks perfect from the outside but suffocates you from within, this story will hit different. Hit that subscribe button, because what I'm about to tell you will change how you see love, pride, and the silent wars people fight for you when you're not watching. My name is Samson, and I used to think I knew what love looked like. I grew up middle class in a neighborhood where hard work meant something, where my father taught me that a man's worth came from his hands and his word, not his bank account. I worked my way through state college on scholarships and part-time jobs, built a decent career as a civil engineer. Nothing glamorous, nothing that would make headlines, but honest work. The kind of work that put food on the table and let me sleep at night knowing I'd earned every dollar. I designed bridges, calculated load capacities, solved problems with math and sweat. My world made sense. Then I met Bridget at an infrastructure conference, and my whole world tilted sideways. She was presenting on sustainable urban development, brilliant, passionate, the kind of speaker who could make drainage systems sound like poetry. When she laughed at my question about soil compression ratios, I was done for. We talked for hours after her presentation, debating load-bearing calculations and green building techniques like other people flirt over cocktails. She never mentioned her last name. Never mentioned that her family owned half the commercial real estate in 3 states. I found out on our 3rd date when paparazzi swarmed us outside a coffee shop. Sorry, she said, looking genuinely embarrassed as cameras flashed around us. I should have told you. My family's complicated. Complicated was the understatement of the century. But I was already falling, and there was no parachute for what came next. The Vandermeer family made old money look new. Bridget's father had built an empire from commercial real estate that stretched across 3 states. Her brother Sebastian ran it now with the kind of ruthless efficiency that made business journals write profiles with titles like The Iron Prince of Property. Her mother collected charities the way some people collect art, as trophies, as social currency, as proof of a legacy that mattered. And me? I was the first man Bridget had ever brought home who didn't have a trust fund, a pedigree, or a last name that opened doors. I should have seen the warning signs at dinner when she finally introduced me to her family. Her mother's smile was all teeth and no warmth when Bridget announced we were dating. How charming, she said, the word dripping with everything it didn't mean. And what is it you do, Samson? I'm a civil engineer, I said. I work on infrastructure projects, bridges, drainage systems, sustainable development. How earnest, her mother replied, exchanging a glance with Sebastian that I couldn't quite read but felt in my gut. The engagement 3 months later was a war zone I didn't know I was entering. When Bridget told her family we were getting married, her mother actually laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a full, incredulous laugh that echoed through their marble foyer. Oh darling, every woman has her phase. Just make sure he signs a prenup. Sebastian pulled me aside at the engagement party, his hand heavy on my shoulder, his smile sharp as broken glass. Nothing personal, Samson, he said, slipping a folded check into my jacket pocket. But you're not equipped for this life. Take the money. Walk away. Save yourself the embarrassment. I looked at the check later, $2 million, written in his careless scrawl like it meant nothing to him. Like I meant nothing. I should have walked away then. Should have listened to the voice in my head screaming that I was outmatched, out of my depth, drowning before I'd even hit the water. But then I saw Bridget across the room, her eyes finding mine through the crowd of designer suits and champagne glasses. She looked at me like I was her last breath of fresh air in a suffocating room. Like I was the only real thing in a world made of facades and price tags. I couldn't abandon her. Wouldn't. I tore up Sebastian's check and threw it in the trash. I thought I was protecting her from loneliness. I didn't know she was preparing to go to war. The wedding was beautiful and horrible in equal measure. My family sat on one side of the aisle, my parents in their Sunday best, my sister who'd taken time off from her nursing job, cousins and friends who'd driven hours to be there. Simple people with warm smiles and genuine joy. The Vandermeers sat on the other side like they were attending a funeral. Designer everything, expressions carved from ice, whispering behind manicured hands. Her mother wore black, actually wore black to her own daughter's wedding, like she was in mourning. Sebastian didn't come at all, sending instead a crystal vase so expensive it probably cost more than my car, with a card that read, "For when this ends." Two different species forced to occupy the same space. But then Bridget walked down that aisle, and none of it mattered. She was stunning in her dress, but it was her eyes that held me, determined, defiant, and locked on mine like I was the only person in the room. When she reached me and took my calloused engineer's hands in her soft ones, she whispered, "We're going to be okay." I believed her. Moving into her world was like drowning in silk. The penthouse apartment had more square footage than my childhood home. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that cost more than my annual salary, art on the walls that I was afraid to stand too close to. Staff I didn't ask for, a housekeeper, a chef, a driver. Cars in the garage I was terrified to scratch. Every surface gleaming, every corner perfect, every detail screaming that I didn't belong. And every single day, subtle reminders to make sure I knew it. Her mother started dropping by unannounced, always when Bridget was at work. She'd walk through our home like she owned it, which, I'd learn later, she technically did through some trust fund arrangement. She'd make comments about my clothes. "Is that what you're wearing today?" About my speech. "You mean whom, darling?" About my career. "Still playing with dirt and concrete, Samson?" How quaint. Sebastian invited us to family dinners where they discussed business acquisitions worth hundreds of millions, mergers and offshore accounts and corporate strategies, then turned to me with practiced smiles and asked, "So, Samson, how are your little projects going?" Little projects. Like the sustainable housing development I was designing meant nothing. Like the infrastructure that kept their precious city running was beneath their notice. I'd watch Bridget at those dinners, see her jaw tighten, her fork grip a little harder. But she never said anything. Never defended me. Just smiled that practiced smile and changed the subject. That's when I started wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. Every day, I felt myself getting smaller. What I didn't see was Bridget getting sharper, colder, more calculating. I thought she was becoming one of them. I was wrong. But the worst part, Bridget started changing. 6 months into our marriage, she hired a stylist for me. Just showed up one day with a woman named Margot who looked at my clothes like they were evidence of a crime. "We need to elevate your image," Bridget said, not meeting my eyes. Within a week, my comfortable jeans and work boots were replaced with tailored slacks and Italian leather shoes that pinched my feet. Then came the suggestions about my career. "Have you ever thought about consulting?" she asked one morning over coffee. "You know, advising firms instead of doing the actual field work? It's more prestigious. Prestigious. Like there was something shameful about getting my hands dirty, about being on site where the real work happened." She started scheduling our lives entirely around her family's calendar. Her mother's charity galas. Sebastian's business dinners. Foundation events where I'd stand in rooms full of people who introduced themselves by their net worth and their last names, waiting for me to do the same, then looking disappointed when I didn't. The woman who'd loved talking about soil compression and load-bearing calculations, who'd gotten genuinely excited about drainage system innovations, stopped asking about my work entirely. When I tried to tell her about the sustainable housing project I was designing, something I was actually proud of, she'd nod absently and say, "That's nice, honey," before checking her phone. We went from talking for hours to barely talking at all. I'd try to reach her. "Bridget, can we talk about—" "Not now, Samson. I'm exhausted. Maybe this weekend we could. I have the foundation brunch. Mother expects us both. I feel like we're losing. I'm dealing with family business. Can we discuss this later?" Later never came. Our apartment became a museum where two strangers passed each other in $1,000 silence. She'd leave early for the office, come home late smelling like expensive wine and other people's ambitions. We'd sleep in the same bed, separated by miles of Egyptian cotton and everything we weren't saying. I started wondering if her family had been right all along. Maybe I was just a phase. A rebellion she'd grown tired of. A mistake she was too polite to correct directly, so she was just waiting for me to figure it out and leave on my own. The loneliness of being married to someone who felt like a stranger was worse than any loneliness I'd ever known. I was disappearing. And the woman I'd married seemed perfectly content to watch me fade away. I was disappearing. And the woman I'd married seemed perfectly content to watch me fade away. Then came the charity gala, the night that made my decision for me. Her mother's foundation was launching some new initiative, something about urban renewal that sounded noble until you realized it meant displacing poor families to build luxury condos. I was expected to attend. Not invited, expected. Like hired help who couldn't say no. I wore the suit Bridget's stylist had picked out, the one that cost more than my first car. Smiled at the right times. Shook hands with people who looked through me like I was made of glass. Stood next to my wife while she worked the room with the practiced ease of someone born into this world, and I felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. Her mother found me by the bar. "Samson," she said, linking her arm through mine like we were old friends. She guided me toward a group of her associates, all gray-haired men in expensive suits. "This is my daughter's husband. He does something with construction, I think." Construction. Like I was a day laborer. Like my degree and my career and everything I'd worked for could be dismissed with a vague wave of her hand. The pity in their eyes burned worse than contempt ever could. I excused myself, found a quiet hallway, and just breathed. Tried to remember who I was before all this. Before the penthouse and the stylist and the constant feeling that I was performing in a play where everyone knew their lines except me. When we got home that night, Bridget went straight to her office. I saw her laptop open on the desk, the glow illuminating her face. I was going to just go to bed, let it go like I let everything go lately. Then I saw the email subject line, post-nuptial agreement, revised terms. My stomach dropped. My hands went cold. I stood in the doorway, reading over her shoulder. Legal language about asset protection, separate accounts, division of property. She was preparing for the end. Protecting what was hers from what little I had. Making it official, legal, clean. She was protecting her assets, preparing for the inevitable. I was exactly what her family said I was, a phase, a mistake, a poor decision she was preparing to correct. That night, while she slept, I started packing. Quietly. Carefully. Just my clothes, my books, my engineering awards that looked so small and worthless next to her family's legacy. I found an apartment across town, month-to-month lease, the kind of place I could afford on my actual salary. I drafted my own divorce papers because I couldn't afford the lawyers she could. I had 1 week left in the cage. 1 week before I'd be free, poor, and broken. But at least I'd still be me. Or what was left of me. Or what was left of me. The day came faster than I expected. Emergency board meeting at the Vandermeer family office. Bridget asked me to come, said it was important. I almost laughed at that. Important. Nothing about me had been important to her in months. But I agreed. One last family meeting before I disappeared from her life for good. The divorce papers sat in my briefcase like a bomb waiting to detonate. I'd practiced what I'd say. Rehearsed how I'd hand them to her calmly, with dignity, without breaking down. How I'd walk away with my head high even though everything inside me was shattered. We arrived early at the Vandermeer building. All glass and steel and corporate power, the kind of place designed to make you feel small before you even walk through the door. The receptionist knew Bridget by name, smiled at her with genuine warmth, then looked at me like she was trying to place where she'd seen the help before. The conference room was on the top floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city I'd helped build with my bridges and my calculations and my little projects that nobody here thought mattered. Bridget touched my arm. "Wait here," she said. "I need to speak with Mother privately first." "Conference room politics," she added with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. She disappeared into her mother's private office down the hall. I stood in the conference room alone, briefcase heavy in my hand, rehearsing my lines one more time in my head. "Bridget, this isn't working. We both know it. Here are the papers. I'll make this easy for you. Clean. Simple. Quick." The door to her mother's office didn't close all the way. I could see it from where I stood, just slightly ajar. And voices carry in these corporate spaces, built for echoes and power and making sure everyone knows who's in charge. I heard Bridget's voice first. "This ends today. Steel-edged. Cold. a tone I'd never heard from her before. My hand froze on my briefcase. What was ending? The marriage. Was she beating me to it? Had she figured out I was leaving and decided to take control of the narrative first? I should have walked out. Should have given her privacy, protected myself from whatever humiliation was coming. But something in her voice, that steel, that fire, rooted me to the spot. And what I heard next shattered everything I thought I knew. You will sign these documents, Mother, or I will destroy everything you've built. You will sign these documents, Mother, or I will destroy everything you've built. My knees nearly buckled. My hand gripped the briefcase so hard my knuckles went white. Darling, be reasonable, her mother's voice, for once stripped of its usual condescension. Reasonable. Bridget's laugh was sharp, bitter, nothing like the sound I'd fallen in love with. You want to talk about reasonable? You've spent 2 years trying to break my husband. 2 years of comments, contempt, calculated cruelty. You thought I didn't notice? You thought I'd just let you torture the man I love until he gave up and left. The man I love. The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the conference table to steady myself. He's not one of us, Sebastian's voice now, dripping with disdain. He never will be. Thank God for that. Bridget's words cut through the air like a blade. Because one of us means you, Mother, embezzling from your own foundation. 3 million over 5 years, hidden in shell companies and fake vendors. And you, Sebastian, insider trading, securities fraud, bribing city officials to push through developments that should never have been approved. I have everything. Documents, recordings, transaction records. 3 years of evidence. Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. My mind couldn't process what I was hearing. 3 years. We'd only been married for 2. You're bluffing, her mother said, but her voice shook. The post-nuptial agreement you saw on my laptop? Bridget continued. It removes me entirely from the family trust and business. I don't want your blood money. I never did. The lawyers you thought I was consulting about asset protection? They were actually documenting your crimes. Every charity gala, every family dinner, every event where you humiliated my husband, I was gathering evidence. My husband. She kept saying my husband like it meant something. Like I meant something. And Samson's little projects. Her voice softened slightly when she said my name. He's been designing the new sustainable housing development downtown, the one that'll replace those properties you've been illegally holding through fraudulent zoning variances. The mayor called him personally last month to thank him. He's brilliant, and you couldn't see it because you only recognize value in dollar signs and pedigree. You wouldn't dare, her mother breathed. I already have. The FBI has copies. The SEC has copies. Every journalist who's ever wanted to take you down has copies. You have one choice. Sign over your voting shares to me, retire quietly, and I'll keep this private. Or refuse, and I'll watch you both go to prison while your empire burns. The room spun. My knees buckled. Everything I thought I knew, every conviction, every hurt, every reason I had for leaving, inverted in an instant. She wasn't ashamed of me. She was protecting me. She wasn't becoming one of them. She was destroying them. For me. My hands shook. The briefcase slipped from my grip, hitting the floor with a sharp crack that echoed through the conference room. The divorce papers spilled out, scattering across the polished marble like evidence of my own stupidity. The voices in the other room stopped. Footsteps. Then Bridget appeared in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes wide. She looked from me to the papers on the floor, and I watched something break across her face. Samson. You knew. My voice came out rough, broken. This whole time, you knew what they were doing to me. She stepped forward, hands outstretched like she was approaching something wild and wounded. I was building a case. I was protecting you. By letting them break me. The words ripped out of me. By changing who I was. By making me feel like I was nothing. No. Her voice turned fierce, desperate. I changed who I was. The stylist, the schedule, the distance. I was playing their game while I dismantled them. Every event I dragged you to, every cold shoulder, every time I seemed like I didn't care, I was gathering evidence. Every conversation recorded. Every transaction documented. I couldn't tell you because you're too good, Samson. You would have tried to fight fair, and they would have destroyed you. Behind her, her mother appeared, Sebastian beside her, both of them looking smaller somehow, their power stripped away. Bridget picked up one of the divorce papers, her hands trembling. Tears streamed down her face, smudging her perfect makeup. But I understand if I waited too long. If I let them hurt you past the point of healing. I thought I was protecting you. I was really just losing you. Her mother moved toward the door. Sit down. Bridget's voice cracked like a whip. We're not finished. And in that moment, I saw her clearly for the first time in 2 years. Not the society wife. Not the distant stranger who'd stopped asking about my work. But the woman who'd fallen in love with drainage systems and load-bearing calculations. The woman who'd laughed at my engineering jokes and stayed up until 3 in the morning debating sustainable building practices. The woman who'd been waging a war I couldn't see. I walked forward, stepping over the scattered papers. Picked them up one by one. Walked to the paper shredder in the corner of the conference room and fed them through, watching them turn to confetti. Next time, I said, turning back to her, we fight together. Her smile broke through her tears like sunrise after the longest night. She crossed the room in 3 steps and threw her arms around me, and I held her like I should have been holding her all along, tight enough that nothing could pull us apart again. Behind us, her mother's voice. You can't seriously. Security is on their way, Bridget said without turning around, her face pressed against my chest. You have 10 minutes to leave this building. If you ever come near my husband again, every single document goes public. Every crime. Every bribe. Every lie. I'll make sure the whole world knows exactly who you are. You have 10 minutes to leave this building. If you ever come near my husband again, every single document goes public. Every crime. Every bribe. Every lie. I'll make sure the whole world knows exactly who you are. Security arrived within minutes. Her mother left screaming about lawsuits and reputation. Sebastian on his phone already calling lawyers who wouldn't be able to save him. Their empire, built on decades of cruelty and corruption, was crumbling in real time. We sat in that empty conference room afterward, just the two of us, really talking for the first time in what felt like years. Show me, I said. Show me everything. She did. 3 years of meticulously documented evidence. Recordings from family dinners where they'd mocked me, thinking she wasn't listening. Financial records she'd copied during late nights at the office when I'd thought she was avoiding me. Photographs of documents, emails with lawyers and investigators, a case built brick by brick while I'd thought she was building walls between us. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Because you would have stayed and fought, she said, and they would have destroyed you. They've had decades of practice being cruel, Samson. You have too much good in you to fight the way they fight. So I fought alone, in ways they'd understand. Every time you got up and faced them again, every time you didn't let them see you cry, every time you chose to stay when anyone else would have run, you were fighting too. I just made sure their weapons couldn't reach you. By taking all the hits yourself. By making sure their hits meant nothing in the end. Within a week, the news broke. Federal indictments. Securities fraud. Embezzlement. The Vandermeer name, once synonymous with power and prestige, became synonymous with corruption. Her mother and Sebastian lost everything. The company, the reputation, the social standing they'd killed souls to maintain. Bridget walked away with nothing but her own money, the kind she'd earned through her actual work in sustainable development. We sold the penthouse with its ghosts and its suffocating perfection. Bought a house with a yard and a mortgage and walls that didn't feel like a museum. My parents came over for dinner last week. My dad and I grilled burgers while Bridget and my mom talked about her new projects. No staff. No designer clothes. No pretense. Just us, building something real from the ashes of what almost destroyed us. Sometimes love doesn't look like fairy tales. Sometimes it looks like someone burning down their entire world to save yours. Sometimes the person you think stopped fighting for you is actually fighting a war you can't see, making sacrifices you'll never fully understand, protecting you in ways that look like distance but are really the deepest form of devotion. The cage I thought I was living in? It was actually her sacrifice, A performance she gave to protect me while she dismantled the people who wanted to break us. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to remember that not all battles are visible, not all love is loud, and sometimes the strongest person in your life is fighting wars you'll never see. And remember, the cage you're living in might actually be someone else's sacrifice. The question is, are you willing to stay long enough to find out? Because sometimes, the love you're ready to walk away from is actually the love that's been saving you all along.